Hello, everybody. Welcome to the UEF podcast, where we will be discussing love, learn, and play in the life of the Gundersens. Daniel and Natalie Gundersen are joining me today via Zoom to discuss these core themes of flourishing: love, learn, and play. I apologize for the lighting. Um, the reason for this interview actually stems from the fact that at UEF we believe love, learn, and play to be the three core principles of flourishing. In fact, we believe that they are the core human longings. And of all the friends and people I know in this world who do or don't flourish, the most amazing of them are the Gundersens. I've seen their family life a little bit, and they have a third child coming up on the way. And I saw so much love and learn and play in the way that they treat each other and themselves that I thought it would just be wonderful to have an interview with them. And to be honest, it's been a long time since I've spoken with Daniel Gundersen. Entire minutes have gone by since our last conversation. So it'll be nice to catch up and see what's going on. So, just to start, if it's okay with you two, I'd like you to just introduce yourselves to start the podcast, and then we'll get into all the questions.
For sure. Christophe, you flatter, but I appreciate your sentiments there. But yeah, I'll introduce myself first. Yes, I grew up in a small town in a small town in Idaho, and a very farming community. My That's where my parents wanted us to grow up. My dad was an engineer, but had a hobby farm, over 1,000 fruit trees, so got a lot of chances to kind of grow up out in the farm and do that kind of lifestyle. I became a chemical engineer, worked in the gas and oil industry, and since shifted to do an MBA to slightly alter my career path. But that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I'm Natalie Gundersen and I grew up in the Chicago, Illinois area. So totally different suburbia. But anyway, I am a registered dietitian. I work part-time and I also yeah, we have two kids and like you said, one on the way. So
Wonderful. And when I say on the way, I mean coming right up, right?
Next week.
next week, yep.
Next. I love that. So, since we're talking about love, learn, and play today, and that's the core theme, and there will be some other themes we go over and discuss, I suppose the first initial question should be how does love express itself in your home and in your life, and how has it influenced your path through life?
Yes. When I think of love, I think of another four-letter word, and that is time, time. And
Mm-hmm.
I was once, I guess I'll start by giving a story here, but I was at a conference and Jesse Itzler, a billionaire, was speaking to us, but he uh he really kind of put some of this in perspective for me and kind of gave that speech that it's time. And he'd said, you never sacrifice this for this, and being your ambition, your money, your drive for what you already have, and it's your family, your relationships that you already have. And so often I will mention our kids throughout this a bit, but we express love a lot by spending time with our kids, and just mentoring, guiding. It's a love of labor of love, if you will, to do bedtime routine every night, to read those stories, to make sure those teeth are brushed.
Mm-hmm.
There was a whole phase. My daughter's gotten tired of my stories anymore. I have to read them, but I made up stories for about a year straight of just. We were in a castle. I was the king. She was the princess. We'd go on adventures into the mountains. She'd ad lib hers in. But
Oh
to
my
me,
goodness.
that's love, and that bond is there just to see that brightness in her eyes and to experience stuff together. And that to me is how that is. And then in addition to your second question, what was the second part of the question?
So how has it kind of shaped your? I think you answered both parts actually, to be honest.
Okay.
And the one thing I wanted to kind of highlight there is you talked about, love as in giving time, but when you talked about what constituted the time you spent with your family, you made it clear that learning and play were a big part of that love as well, because you talked about mentorship, You talked about guiding and teaching, and you talked about, inventing stories in the evenings for your children. She's the princess and you're on this adventure and she's ad-libbing her parts. So it sounds like a big part of how you love is also to play with your children, to play and be played with a little bit, to just kind of engage in this sense of imagination, right?
Hmm.
Which is such a crucial part of a playful life, is that you let your imagination roam, you let yourself conceive of ways of being, and you let yourself think of stories and think of games and think of the types of abundantly joyful activities that construct a happy family. Because I know your family, so I can confirm you have a happy family. As far as, I mean, if you don't, you hide it like nobody could. I don't know how you are hiding it. Um, and so I think, the way that you answered that was so nice, because you highlighted the interrelations of love, learn, and play in your very first response. The thing that I want to follow up with and ask about is, you mentioned this billionaire talking about, that you kind of sometimes trade ambition for family, or family for ambition. And
Hmm.
I know from talking with you previously that you had this beautiful discussion once about seeing cabins, giant cabins on skiing hills. Do you mind explaining that a little bit? Because it sounds like that perspectival shift is really central to who you are today.
Yes. And so yeah, there was kind of this big shift over the last couple of years, which has led to a much happier outcome for me and a more flourishing state, if you will. And how it started, I mean, we as a family like to hike, we like to go do activities, all manner of things. But I remember there was a period I was about 5 years out of my master's degree working, and I just wasn't very happy. All I could think of was my fire movement, you just the financial independence, retire early, and that was the goal at the time. And then, I was making a decent wage, but it wasn't crazy money. And so we'd be on this hike, and I was up in the mountains in the ski resort, and you'd see this cabin, which is probably $3 to $5 million. And I just looked up there and thought, I'm never going to have that on my current trajectory. And it kind of drove me crazy. It actually made me miserable, honestly. Natalie had pointed out one time to me this, like, this isn't very fun because all you're thinking about is what we don't have and stuff like that.
Mm.
Well, I did make a career shift. I went to an MBA and I thought I'll be on some different money trajectory. But what I learned through this process was through various guest speakers of what it takes to get that. And there's often a lot of sacrifice, so much sacrifice that to me it wasn't worth it. There
Mm.
were many people on who came to talk and had, put in all their 100-hour weeks and everything. But there was a common thread when people asked follow-up questions about, oh, how was your family work-life balance and all this other stuff. And one of them had said something to the effect of, my oldest children were kind of like tenants in my home. I never really knew them. And to me, that was like this gut punch. Just even at
Mm.
the time, my daughter wished that I was home all the time. She would sit and look out the window about the time I would get home and just couldn't wait for dada
Mhm.
to come home. And I'd been interviewing for investment banking to go to New York City to live that life. And I just that Jesse Itzler thing resounded in my head that never sacrifice this for this. And those are
Mhm.
some of his regrets. So fast forward to my story a little bit. It was about a year later. I was between years in my MBA and I was hiking those same areas. And I looked up at that cabin and I just saw the chain that would have been and the sacrifice it would have taken on my family at that time to get that. And I was like, that is not worth it. I was smiling. I was happily going by that, realizing it's not, I mean, sure, if millions of dollars fell on me, I'd love to have that cabin, but it wasn't worth it to go chase that dream, to miss the lives of my children growing up and the life that I have for that. It came with a cost that just wasn't worth it. It was a shackle and a chain. And yeah, to follow up a little more just on that Jesse Isler story, he talked about he was chasing his dreams through his 20s, his 30s, his 40s. I know his mother always wanted to take a Europe trip with him. Like, we should go. We should go to England. We should go to France. We should do this. And he said, "No, no, no, Mom, I'm busy with my band. No, 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 I can't remember the specifics, but I'm busy with this. I'm busy with that." And he built a $1 billion thing. And finally he said, "Mom, I think we should go." And by that time she was too old. She couldn't travel
Mm,
anymore. And he just realized, to me, I understood it from him was that like I'm a billionaire now, but it wasn't worth it. I wish I could go back and live the other life that I had, because I sacrificed
mhm,
this for this. And
mhm.
and it was very powerful. The most powerful, you know, message I think I heard during that whole program of all the guest speakers and everything. And it really shook me. And I literally remember having that coming back into my mind when I was in this another info session with Rothschild, to go their investment banking thing. And at the end of the session, I didn't walk up and try to play the schmooze game. And I just stood up and I walked down. I said, "I'm leaving this life behind. And I'm
Wow.
very happy for it, just to have the flexibility with my family. I work from home. I see them at breakfast. I see them at lunch, at dinner most days. We have plenty of time to interact, and it's the dream that I wanted. So that's the
I love that. I love that for two reasons. One, I love how the cabin itself was at first the image of success for you, and then it became more like the image of a prison or something like that, a prison to ambition. Because at
Mhm.
UEF, we talk often about means ends inversion, which is when people mistake the means to get to the ends they want for the ends themselves. So the primary example of that would be something like money, which is, we tend to want money in order to live a life that allows us to spend time with our family, to travel, to hike, to do all those kinds of things. And then sometimes seeing the instrument of money as enabling those ends, we start to think money is the end in itself. And you successfully avoided that means ends inversion in a really incredible way. And I'm wondering, Natalie, from your perspective, did you see that shift? Did he become more loving and kind of playful? Was he more into learning and all of the elements of flourishing when he went from pursuing the raw ambition of financial gain to embracing the fact that he's already living the dream?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, some of it was, I feel like, well, he's always been a pretty playful person, I guess.
That's
Um,
true.
but you know, um,
Yeah.
but I think part of it was honestly just where his career trajectory was going at the time. I feel like it was like he wanted to retire early just because he wasn't happy with where he was. Anyway, so I feel like learning
Mhm.
and the education, the extra education he got, right? He already had a master's in chemical engineering, but the addition of the MBA just opened up more doors, um, and allowed him to have like more of you know, um, a work-life balance that he enjoyed where it wasn't like just thinking about money, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, at the end of every month, I would just like get a fix on my budgeting and like, did I save money this month? How much was it? And that was like the only thing that I was like focused on. And
Hmm.
it wasn't fun at all to only be thinking about that money number. It's like what is the point of all this to your point? It's like
Hmm.
am I doing the things I want to be doing as opposed to, just clocking some number that honestly is, you know, to some degree irrelevant.
yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, that that's a very profound epiphany to go through. You learned, in a sense, the value of love, and you did it in a way that very few people do, which is to say that you actually learned from other people's mistakes, right?
Hmm.
Because one of the primary ways we learn is to unlearn, right? And what I mean by that is that in life, especially as we're growing up in a certain kind of culture and method of being, there's a lot of false narratives that are kind of imposed upon us. There are these ways of thinking about what constitutes success and what constitutes flourishing that are given to us, and they don't necessarily have anything to do with reality or with loving and learning and playing. We're told that being filthy rich is success, and being powerful is what matters, and being handsome or beautiful or whatever is ultimately more important than being happy and playing with your children. And that sounds like the first lesson. You not all of that. I've known you many years, and you've always been a profoundly good person. But it sounds like the first lesson that you were taught was money is success, right?
Mhm. Or I
And
picked it
then
up somewhere along the way, I thought that was the answer.
you thought that was the answer. And then you unlearned that false narrative without having to wait until you're 60 looking back at your life with a heart filled with regret. You actually listened to what other people have gone through and took it seriously as it applies to your life, right? And I
Hmm.
think that shows a deep commitment to learning, including unlearning, which is perhaps sometimes the most important form of learning, unlearning the illusions, the lies, the myths, the false treatments of reality. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Where did you get this capacity to unlearn from?
Hmm. You know, growing up, I think it was a common adage in my home that, you can learn from others, you can learn from your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Your own mistakes can be very powerful teachers, but you're wise if you can actually see that in someone else and learn from their mistakes. And so I think that was just, something taught in my home growing up. And in addition to, I didn't bring this up earlier, but this whole love, learn, and play motif was that my motif my mother said many, many times to me growing up, very, very similar, but there was work, learn, play, and pray. Those were the focuses of every day. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you should be working some, you should be learning, you should be playing and praying. And those were the some of the key tenets. So I afford a lot of my learning to my mother, who was always teaching me various adages and giving me insights.
That's amazing. So you literally, and of course, love can be presumed to be implicit in the background
Absolutely.
of that. And you were literally told to learn and play from your childhood onward.
Absolutely. Yes. Every day. Oh, not every day, but many, many times that came up of, you know, to have that as a part of my daily life.
And do you think it was a good lesson?
Yes. And I I think that if I look around, it's as part of this whole revelation of the last few years or epiphany that's come up is that sometimes the things around me, it's like I've already made these choices, to surround myself with books that I'm interested, and various resources, or going to many, many degrees or something. But also there was this moment in, focusing in on the play. I was kind of like, what do I really care about? I took a lot of time thinking about what's my fulfilled life vision, and made all these
Mm-hmm.
tenets and wrote them out. But part of it is this play aspect of this fun. And I looked in my garage. I was just kind of pondering one day, and I was like, oh, I have baseball equipment. I have spike ball.
Mm-hmm.
I have bocce ball. I have croquet. I have basketballs. I have all these things that I enjoy doing in the park. And I was like, the answer is already here. All these past
That's
choices
right.
I've made, like they were for a reason, and I love doing this. Why not spend my time doing that which I love, and ensuring I get that play aspect into my life.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, speaking of bocce ball, it's not a game I want to talk about too much because you know, there was some uh I don't know, maybe you were using steroids or something, but you kind of blew me out of the water. I'm pretty good at bocce ball myself normally.
I
I
thought
blame
you
the
called it
grass.
petanque. You must have been
Petanque,
playing
maybe
some
that
other
was my
game.
downfall.
There we go.
Absolutely, that was my mistake, is that I called it petanque, referencing the French name for it.
Exactly.
Um, but that's, you talked about something extremely profound to me. And in a moment I'm going to ask some kind of like how do you play in the home and stuff like that questions. But right now just one more kind of abstract question, which is you mentioned that you look in the garage, you see the bocce ball, you see the baseball equipment and all of this stuff, and you realize that what you've wanted to do has been in front of you all along, right? So I'm wondering how you feel about the notion that to love, learn, and play, especially for you, which you just mentioned play, is a kind of natural longing that we have as a human being to engage in these things, and that really the task at hand is not to figure out and construct and envision what might matter. It's to let what matters be. It's to let ourselves enjoy what we already care about. In the same way that you walked into that garage to see all the play equipment and said, wow, it's here already. The longing's already in us from our childhood onward, and we just kind of let it express itself when we live a life that's not submitted to false narratives and means, ends, and versions and a sequence of other traps we could fall into. And so I'm just kind of curious at the abstract level how you, Daniel, or you, Natalie, feel about the notion that loving, learning, and playing are innate longings, are just features of the human experience.
You want to start?
Okay.
Yeah. For me, yes, like you said, I think a lot of things that we seek out in life, we're all on this search for what is my career, what do I enjoy doing and everything. And I think a lot of the time it's subconscious. It's already there or innate within us. And it was in that moment where I was trying to period of 6 months where I was like, what am I really chasing? What am I really wanting? That epiphany happened. That's like I've already been making these choices. Like my
Mm-hmm.
subconscious already knew I wanted all this, and it was just like this. Wow, like I'm figuring it out. Like I'm figuring out what I like, not so much just putting this goal in front of me that I'm going to go chase this thing. It's this just this innate drive to figure that out. And similarly with learning, I ended up in the energy industry. Well, when I think back through going through this whole process as well, I realized that being at the baseball field as a young boy, we were spinning the merry-go-round around, and I don't know, a lot of the other kids might be thinking hop on, have fun, and I was doing that, but I also was thinking like I mean, I was 5 years old at the time, thinking, I wonder if I could generate electricity by spinning this. Like I wonder if this could be a power production means. And so
Right.
that is one more thing. Is like it's kind of innate. Like I've always been interested in energy and chemistry and
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff, and it was just a matter of me discovering it.
Mm-hmm. So you basically you don't have to, in your opinion, your job wasn't to invent what mattered, right? It wasn't to create something new that counts ultimately for you. But in your opinion, you're subconsciously already going towards what you care about the most. And your job was to pay attention to where
Yes.
your subconscious wanted you to go, right?
Hmm.
And that's
It's
what you
almost
did.
like
You paid
I
attention.
can't. You might be able to tell me this, but there was a sculptor, maybe a medieval sculptor or something, who was like, I'm not creating this statue, I'm freeing it. And so that like the
Mm,
statue's already in this block. And
that's
Was
right.
that David?
it might have been David or something,
Mm.
but they carved away and chipped away to kind of free the image that was already there. And I think that's the search for happiness in life sometimes is when we're learning about ourselves, is like it's there already. We just gotta suss it out or find it or extract it from what's hiding deep within the gut or the subconscious.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that metaphor that, inside of the stone is every part of the sculpted perfection, right? Every part of the sculptor's goal is already living inside the stone, and you carve away at the excess that blocks you from seeing it, right?
Hmm.
And so that's something, it sounds very, very apropos to your life, where you've carved away at the excess that blocked you from seeing what you cared about the most and what you most wanted to
Absolutely.
do. And so my next question is, you know, I saw just such, recently visiting your family, I saw such an idyllic scene of what family could be, right? When you were interacting with your children and talking about strawberries and what's the difference between good and bad and and all of this wonderful, wonderful stuff. And I'm wondering, how do you play in the home? What are the various expressions of play for you in the family home? Because we've talked a little bit about how, what love is to you, which is time. We've talked about how the learning is incorporated into that and the role of learning in your life and how much you care about play. But concretely, what kind of games do you play and what sorts of things do you do to make sure that you're playing enough?
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, truly, I mean, kids play be much better than adults, of course. So a lot of it is letting them lead the way. When they were, I mean, they're still fairly young, but they're getting to a point where it's all about like imaginative play. And to be honest, as an adult, I don't love the lack of structure of that sometimes, but um I don't know. I just I'm trying to embrace it because it's what they love at this time. But um yeah, a lot of it is just like engaging, asking questions, listening, trying to mirror what they're doing, to be honest. Like I feel like there's a lot we can learn from kids about play.
Hmm. Specifically,
Absolutely.
one of the games
Go
that
on.
gets played every single day at our house is called Cuz. And so
We're
we're
cousins.
cousins. So my daughter loves to play their cousins. Well, when they're not here or we're not there, she wants us to pretend to be a cuz, and there's all different
Oh.
variations that she brings in. Like some days it's normal cuz, some days it's Christmas cuz. Some days, so we pretend Santa Claus comes and delivers presents. And some days it's Dr. Cuz, and so one of us is a patient. And so we're always these cousins playing
What
together.
kind of cousin is that?
I don't know, but there's those versions, and I got chastised the other day multiple times. She's like, "Dad, you don't play this as good as Mom does," and I was like, "Oh well, how should I do it better?" And then later on in the afternoon, she says, "Dad, you're not playing it properly," and so I had to focus up and make sure I towed the line and figured out exactly what I should be doing in this imaginative game.
And Natalie, what is the secret to cuz? What is Daniel missing?
I mean, this truly has more to say probably about our firstborn's personality than not. But a lot of times I just ask, is this right? As I'm about
Oh,
to, a lot of it is just making sure I have her permission.
right, right. So you're checking in with the imagination, right?
Yes.
To see if what she's imagining is actually coherent with what you're doing in the game.
Right,
Whereas
right.
whereas Daniel might be maybe, yeah, not playing the game properly, Daniel,
He might
apparently.
I
be
wasn't playing it
doing too much
properly.
improvisation.
Yes, I was having too many of my own opinions or something.
So instead of going into her world of imagination, you were trying to bring her into your world of imagination.
Yes, and that's the mistake.
Wow, I love that because you were actually both of you playing the game, but it sounds like Daniel, you were getting lost in the game.
Yes, I
That's
wasn't doing it properly.
I love that. But that lesson of like taking instruction in life from children, right?
Hmm.
It's something that not everybody understands. And I think it's interesting because at UEF we talk often about the way that children naturally love, learn, and play when they're fed and clothed and taken care of and not worried about anything immediate or dangerous or whatever. They're just going to love, learn, and play just naturally because they're curious about the world. They're full of love. They enjoy playing games. And so a lot of adults look at that and say, well, that's what children do, but I'm an adult. I've got to be serious. I've got to pursue this. It's all about money and moolah and whatever and whatever. And I got power to acquire. And yet the two of you, as far as I can tell, see that and say, oh, they're onto something, right? Like there's some wisdom in the life of a child that actually can allow us to experience flourishing in ways we couldn't if we were unwilling to see what makes a child happy and ask ourselves, could, even if done in a different way, could something like that make us happy, right?
Hmm.
And
Mm.
so when did you ever have a moment where it seemed like you were learning a lesson from your children? Something great about life or anything like that?
Well, one thing I was just gonna say that you
Yeah.
actually brought up that kind of enlightened me a little bit is that, you know, our kids are receiving instruction from us all day on and being told what to do and all the things. And so it's almost like roles are reversed for one situation, you know? It's like
Mm-hmm.
cause is where our daughter is the one giving instruction, is in control. And that's probably really nice because I mean, even at 4 or 5 years old, it's probably very annoying to just always be told what to do. So
Right.
anyway, that
Because
that
even
is enlightening to think about.
I love that because even if it's good for you to, have instruction as a child and whatnot, and there are things you don't know that you need to learn and so forth and so on, just as a human being, we don't tend to enjoy being told what to do all the time. So I don't see why that would change for a child, right?
Right.
Yes.
And in fact, I almost think it's a good sign sometimes when you see a little bit of rebellious character in a child. It's like, they've got personality, they've got will, a little bit of rebellion, not too much. That I imagine would be, well, it's what I put my parents through. I was uh I was terribly rebellious when I was a kid. I'm still rebellious and I'm paying the price for it every day. But I play a lot, I love a lot, I learn a lot as a philosopher, obviously. So then, one thing I want to kind of ask about is you you mentioned pray in your list of things your mother would recommend to you, Daniel. And
Hmm.
I'm wondering, are you willing to talk about a relationship between your faith and loving, learning, and playing, if there is any?
Yes. And I think that you kind of answer, yeah. How did, I guess, first by playing out, how did pray play out in our daily life? I mean, of course, there's literally praying, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
encompassed, trying to learn, and in our house, learn about God. That was
Mm-hmm.
reading the Bible. That was, having study, and just that was present in our life. And so, um, in our view, that God is kind of an all-knowing and an all happy and loving being. It was like, well, it's a search to learn more. We should be learning
Mm-hmm.
forever. It's not just
Mm.
learning to get a college degree. It's this endless pursuit in of knowledge in this life, all the way, till the moment we're dying. You can be 90 and still learning, and 95 still learning.
Oh
It's like,
yeah.
if you have this view of the for forever, it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
never too late to be learning, and we should always be learning and growing. And so that's kind of part of it. As far as the play aspect, thinking that having, life is just to a large degree about having joy, and
Mm-hmm.
that play brings joy. Of course, we need the work to sustain that, but so that was kind of part of that thought. We get a lot of um just happiness or fulfillment out of the work, not to mention sustaining your own life, but then to also have that time for joy. And so I think play is a fun aspect at the end of every day that I think contributes to that in general. And so I think they're all interconnected.
Oh, I love that. And you suggested something along those while you were talking about, God being all knowing and such. You
Hmm.
suggested something, and I just want to ask you about it because an implication of what you said, and I wonder if you would agree or disagree with it. But you almost suggested there's something divine about learning, right? Like learning is bringing us closer to God because we
Hmm.
are participating in becoming closer to omniscient. We're obviously, at least not within this lifetime, going to be omniscient ourselves, where for those who don't know, omniscience means it's a divine predicate of all knowingness. We might not I mean, we certainly can't know everything in this lifetime. Even if we learned everything, we couldn't hold it all in our heads at once. But the pursuit of learning more is something that is bringing us closer to being divine at each step of the way. Does that sound fair?
You nailed it right on the money. So I do feel that we're in our limited intelligence, always seeking more of God. And as we learn more, we're becoming, just getting a little new measure of that, and reaching closer to Him. So the more we learn in any aspect, whether that be science, whether that be art, whether that be speech, we're slowly gaining in this light that I believe comes from God. And so it is a divine pursuit, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And I just have one last question because I don't know how much time has gone by. I should have seen what time we started, but I know I said it wouldn't be too long because we have a lot to do and so forth. So hopefully this hasn't been too long for you. Um, but the one thing I want to ask about is uh, there's a comparative aspect in our lives, right? Where sometimes we find something that matters to us, but we can't fully enjoy it because somebody else has more of it, right? So there's always the Joneses across the street, and we always want to be better than the Joneses. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on overcoming a life comparison, comparing yourself to what other people have.
Yes. Um, I recently read this meme, in part of this big, large search, but it was, I've been trying to figure out what is wealth? What is true wealth? Is it this flourishing? Is this happiness? But this meme brought it up and it said that wealth is making $100 more per month than your brother-in-law. And so um, to some degree that's true because compare yourself to some other demographic across the world, you're going to be super super wealthy in comparison, but it's the people we interact with around the most, your neighbors, but and specifically your brother-in-law who, hey, like my wife's sister, am I making more than her husband and all this stuff, and I guess you
Yeah.
just have to learn to let that go, and part of that search is to be honest, one of these data points in my whole search has been they live in a very much larger, nicer home than I do, but I'm okay with that. One of the things that
Mm,
they've said is that his boy wants to ask him to go play catch, on a weeknight. He says, "Sorry, I'm busy.
mm,
Sorry, I'm busy. I don't have time for that.
mm.
Sorry, I'm busy." And I want to be available to go play catch. I want to be available to go do those things. I just recently fulfilled a dream of mine that I've had for a long time. I started coaching t-ball for 4-year-olds this week. And
Oh, congratulations.
and if I'd chosen out of the life that was, would pay more money, would be more ambitious, and I've decided to kind of carve that out at least at this phase of life. I have time to be able to go and be that coach. And so I literally looked at Natalie this week. I was like, I'm fulfilling a dream. I'm walking off to do a dream that I've had over a decade at least. I want to coach my children someday. And so um I've redefined that wealth as not making $100 more per month than my brother-in-law, but that I have more time to, another 100 minutes of playing catch with my children every week.
I love that. I love that. And you highlighted something very profound too, in terms of the role of jealousy in life. It is true, like very few people are upset that they're not the King of England, right?
Hmm.
Because we're so far away from the King of England that it doesn't feel like it's a possibility for us. I rarely meet somebody who says, although I have met some, I mean, with giant ego and so forth, and they'll say things like this, but I rarely meet somebody who says it just bothers me that Bill Gates is so much richer than me, uh, because I feel like I'm so similar to him or I'm so close to him, or you rarely. But when
There's
your
a
little
proximity
brother
effect.
your little brother ends up making 100 more than you or whatever it is, then all of a sudden that gets a little bit dicey for some people, right? Because they feel like, well,
Hmm.
they have it and I'm so close to them, I should have at least that, if not more, and so forth. So I guess what I'd like to do is ask a final question, and then I'll let you say any parting thoughts you might have, and then we'll just wrap up. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. So my final question is, sometimes in life, and even in my own life, I've experienced this, we have a need to feel superior to others sometimes, or like we're so special and, more special than the rest of the world. And I think it's a need that torments a lot of people, actually, the need to be superior or special. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the way that some people have that false need to be superior or special at the general level, especially in relation to your own life story and your pursuit of loving, learning, and playing.
You know, and this is, so individual, but for me, the people that I enjoy being the most around, or the people that I genuinely feel are good people that I really want to emulate, are not people that pose as more superior than me, right? Um,
Mm,
and I and that and as an example, my mother-in-law is one of my very favorite people in this world. And there are so many ways that she's more superior than other people for sure, but she'll never act like that. She is so welcoming to everyone. And those are the types of people that I want to surround myself with. And anyway, so I guess that's just getting to know her over the years. That's been very eye-opening of um not trying to be pompous or lift myself above another or trying to prove to another person, I guess.
I love that. Like, basically, what you pursue, who you want to be, uh, is often impacted by who you consider an exemplary person, right? And so, what I'm hearing from you is the people who you perceive as exemplary and therefore who you model yourself after are not at all people who care about being superior, but maybe the exact opposite. People who are there and happy and welcoming and kind and genuinely loving and learning and playing with the world and with everybody else and doing it in a way that has nothing to do with trying to be one step better than somebody else, right? Because the need to be
Hmm.
one step better than somebody else, I think, is itself a kind of prison from within. It's a kind of invisible prison. And so I think that's very profound, actually. And I suppose for your for the parting question, message, whatever, I would just ask you if you would be kind enough, each of you, to share any words of advice you have for people who are looking to love, learn, and play as much as you do, to flourish as much as you do, or to have as happy a family life as you have. What would be your parting statement to those people? And anything else you want to say, just go ahead and add it in there, and I will listen.
Such a weighted question. I've got to just pause and really make sure I get the best message I can here, the major thought.
Yes, take your time. I'll do like some kind of a dance to keep everybody who's watching entertained, the Christophe dance over here in my Airbnb.
Yeah. This kind of pairs in with the last question a little bit too, but I have not that brother-in-law, but a different brother-in-law live in a brand new neighborhood, and everybody has almost the identical homes. They all built them at the same time. Everyone's in the same demographic. And it's very easy to start comparing who's got the newer model of the car, who's got the best paint on the house, who has the lawn that's a little bit better. We're all in the exact little same stage of life. We live in a different neighborhood that has people that are in college all the way to, v well retired, close to passing off through past this life. But
Hmm.
some of the people that I've met in this neighborhood are just so, they just don't care about any of that. They're on their own path. They are just looking at what they want. I think of these old ladies who are sisters in the ward who walk around and look for a service opportunity. Hey, let's go on a walk and see if there's anybody we can help along our way. Let's go deliver some bread. Let's do something. Or there's even somebody who, I mean, he's a multi-millionaire, but you don't really care that much. You just feel like he invites us over for a barbecue, but he has a yacht that he
Hmm.
takes all up and down the Pacific coast. And it just
Hmm.
is just chill that people aren't all the way focused on what the right person right next to you is doing, but more focused on the things that really matter to them of the love, learn, and play. And that should be the goal, that should be the focus, and let the rest of the comparisons drop by the wayside.
I love that. So your piece of advice is to let the comparisons drop by the wayside.
Yes.
I love that. Anything else you want to say? Or I know Natalie looks like you might be ready.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, one thing, at least in American culture, is, when you're talking with people, you're like, oh, what do you do? And you're meaning career. Um, but one thing that I wish people would focus on more of, what are your hobbies, and that's
Hmm.
part of the play part, but I don't, at least in the US, that's not a big focus, but I do think that's where a lot of happiness comes from is hobbies. And anyway, just an encouragement to find what hobbies work for you. And if you have a job that's maybe sitting at a desk, maybe you need something totally different, like picking up tennis or golf or something. You know what I mean? But I think that can bring a lot of happiness outside of career, and um, is finding a hobby.
I love that. Something you do for its own sake, right?
Yeah,
You're not doing it for its prestige or its income or anything else. You're doing it merely because you love it. And
right.
it's inherently justified, the hobby, right?
Yeah.
I love
Yep.
that. I love that so much. Well, thank you both so much for coming on this podcast, for letting me grill you with 1,000 questions, and thank you everyone who tuned in to listen, to learn about how to have a happy life and a happy family, and I hope that today you can walk away knowing that there's no reason to compare yourself perpetually to others, that there's no reason to let the amount of money you make or the amount of power you acquire define who you are or whether you are successful. And that in fact, however you do it and in whichever way you want to do it, you can flourish if you let yourself love, learn, and play. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.